Now, choosing the right Ferrari for you can be a very daunting task. I know for me, I spent the better part of 10 years researching the brand and the various models and cars that they had before I actually pulled the trigger on mine. And during the course of that time, especially during the last 3 years when I got closer financially to be able to afford it, it drastically changed which cars I was considering to purchase, and ultimately bought one that I hadn't originally considered. So today, we're gonna go ahead and dive into things to take into consideration when you start searching for that dream Ferrari for yourself. So the first thing, of course, you need to be realistic about is your budget. Now, before you go and decide what type of Ferrari you want, you need to figure out how much you can afford. And it's not just the purchase price. We're talking also about maintenance and insurance. I would go ahead and figure out, once you get through the next few steps and get to the point where you have a few models selected that you want, I would reach out to your insurance agent and start getting quotes on what the insurance would cost. All right, now of course a cost factor that I know you're thinking about but you're not really diving into are the maintenance costs. Now fortunately, the newer cars from like your 2005 F430 and newer, you're a lot better on your maintenance costs than your older Ferraris. Like even your 360's decent, but older than that, you're really starting to look at some serious maintenance costs. Starting in 2012 and newer, all Ferraris come with a 7-year maintenance plan. So maintenance is covered for the first 7 years of ownership. Now, of course, if you're like me, you bought a 2012, the car is now 11 years old, you're beyond that. But if you're looking at newer cars that are less than 7 years old, you're not gonna have to worry about maintenance costs for a couple of years. Now, of course, you're gonna pay a higher price for those cars, so they just generally cost more, but you won't have the maintenance costs. Now, your older models, I'm looking at like your Testarossas and your 355s, your 348s, things like that, tend to be more maintenance heavy. I mean, you can have an engine out service that costs upwards of $15,000. I know the F355s are notorious for having I think it's the guides or the valve guide seals in the head start leaking. And so you have to have a heads rebuilt every so many years. And so that can be a huge expense of thousands of dollars. Your 355s, probably your 348s and your 360s have belts, timing belts that have to be adjusted every so many years. That's thousands of dollars. When they went to the F430, they replaced the belts with chains and you don't have to have that bill every number of years. Now, also, if you're looking at things like cars that have F1 gearboxes, like some F355s, 360s, F430s, 599s, 575s, the list goes on, you have the added cost of the clutches on those wearing out and potential for big costs if the F1 system fails. I mean, that can be a $20,000 repair bill. And so you need to go ahead and research the specific models you want, what parts tend to wear out, what the costs of those are, and what the typical maintenance cycle is on those. Ferrari Chat is a great resource for finding this type of information out for the specific cars that you want. Now, something I found very interesting when I got my 458, which holds true for all the dual clutch transmission cars, is it's a wet clutch and the clutch is expected to last the life of the vehicle. And so a potential bill of $6,000 or $7,000 every couple of years with an F1 gearbox car, you don't have with this car. Same thing with the brakes. Now, they say with the carbon ceramic brakes, cost can be $30,000+ to replace the rotors and pads on them. But on the flip side, those parts are only supposed to wear out if you're doing heavy track use. You're just doing typical spirited driving and everyday use. Again, like the clutch, the brakes are expected to last the life of the vehicle. And so yes, those parts can be insanely expensive, but they also aren't supposed to wear out like you are on your traditional steel pads and rotors. So you gotta go and weigh all of those costs and potential costs on the specific models that you want. Now, once you've got your budget figured out, now you can start getting to the really fun part of figuring out which type of Ferrari you want, because Ferrari offers a variety of different architectures. I mean, you've got your mid-engine V8s, like your 458s. You've got your front-engine V12s, like the F12 and the 575. You've got your front-engine V8s, like the California, Portofino, Roma. I mean, there are just so many different types of architectures, and you've also got your mid-engine V12s, like your Testarossa, and then your extremes, like your Enzos, your F50s, and your LaFerraris, and everything in between. And so there's so many different architectures. You have to figure out which type you want. Do you want something that's more of a Grand Tourer, the traditional architecture for Ferrari with a front engine V12? Then maybe you want something like a 599 or a 550 or a 575. Do you want the sporty supercar traditional mid-engine V8 like an F430, a 458, or an F8? Or do you just want a fun weekend cruiser, top down, and kick back, relax with something like a California or a Portofino? These are all different types of Ferraris, and I would definitely encourage you to go down to your local dealership and take a look at what the different cars are and what they have to offer and what speaks to you. Now, for me, I wanted to go ahead and have the mid-engine V8 because I already had a similar architecture to the front engine V12 with the front engine V10 in my Viper. Now, of course, the Vipers and the Ferraris with the front engine, very different beasts, but the general physics about it is still the same. And so I wanted something totally different, something I'd never experienced before, and that led me down the mid-engine V8 route. Now, it has changed drastically for me over the last, especially the last 3 years, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, on what I was looking at and what my budget was. And when I first started looking seriously about Ferraris, I was going between the 360 and the F430. And I was leaning towards more to the F430 because they're a little more reliable. I like the exterior styling a little better on the 360 than the F430, but the interior was so much better on the F430 that it ruled out the 360. And having the Manatino and the instrument cluster layout, all of that just really pointed me towards the F430 because I felt once you got inside the 360, it felt dated. Now, the problem with going from the 360 to the 430 is trying to find a gated manual. And originally I was adamant, I had to have a gated manual Ferrari. I wanted that clink clink. Plus I'm a big 3-pedal guy. My Viper, my Challenger, my SRT4, all 3-pedal cars. My Honda, when I had it, was a 3-pedal car. And so that's what I wanted. I didn't want a flappy pedal gearbox. And the 360s is a lot more commonplace to find a 3-pedal gated manual than it is compared to the F430s. I think when it comes to the F430s, less than 15% of those cars were gated manuals. And so that presented its own challenge. Now, when I started looking, the gated 430s were actually cheaper than the F1 equipped cars. But now, of course, everyone wants a gated manual and the price has skyrocketed, and you're looking at 2 times, if not more, for a gated F430 than a base F1 F430. And so from there, I started looking at, well, there's certain options on the F430 that I'd have to change. Like, I want the race buckets, and those are very hard to find on a base F430. I really preferred the Scuderia front fascia to the base F430. And there are things like that. I was like, well, I'm gonna change this and change that. And I'm like, well, now I'm at a point where I'm modifying this car to make it what I want. I'm at the price point of what the Scuderia was at the time. And so now I'm like, wait, but I'm not gonna get that money back if I had to sell it. I was looking at spending, $100,000 on a car, then another $60,000 or $80,000 on modifications to get it to where I really wanted it, but then it really wasn't where I wanted it. And at this point, of course, now the gated option was out because of how the price has gone. So I was looking at F1 cars, and I'm like, well, at the time it was only $200,000 or between 180 and 200,000 for a Scuderia that had all the options I already wanted on it. So it's like, well, okay, well, let's hold off on buying the Ferrari for a couple more years until we could afford the Scuderia. Well, now, of course, Scuderia prices have skyrocketed to the point where they're over $300,000, and there's no way I could justify spending $300,000 on a car that old and with those potential reliability and maintenance issues with the F1 gearbox. Here I could be in a situation where I spend $300,000 on a car, and then next thing you know, I have an F1 pump failure and I'm $20,000 into the hole. And so that was a pill I wasn't financially willing to take the risk on. And so at that point I was like, well, it's cheaper to buy a 458, which is, from an overall standpoint of a special car, the Scuderia is more limited and more special than the base 458 Italia is. But in driving experience, being a true enthusiast of the brand and wanting the ultimate Ferrari driving experience, the 458 really was the better choice. And over the course of 3 years, with going into the dealership every 4 to 6 months, talking with Jeff, him getting to know me and me getting to know the brand even better, we were able to go ahead and be like, well, between the way the pricing is gone and what I really want out of the ownership experience, the 458 made more sense. And so having that help by going to the dealership, talking to them, and really getting to know the staff there, it really helped navigate where I wanted to go and where I ended up. And I will never forget the day when I got the phone call from Jeff saying that he had my dream car, and going in there and seeing it for the first time and knowing instantly that I had to make that happen. And so I hope this information helps you. I hope this story of how I went through my journey to get a Ferrari helps you with your decision making, because it really is a big deal buying a Ferrari, not just from the fact of how much they cost, because yeah, they are stupid expensive, but from the experience and ownership from being a true automotive enthusiast. Ferrari for a lot of people is true automotive perfection and the pinnacle of the automotive world. At least it is for me. And so trying to find the way to be able to best have that experience and make it the best experience possible is really important. And anything I can do to help make that a better experience for you, I'm here to do that.